My mind is drunk with fatigue, my tongue 5 sizes too big and 5 times too dry. The first thing I can comprehend is a deep chuckle from above me. I recognize it. I'd heard it recently. "Dan, stop that!" he giggles. "We need to get inside." Phil wrestles me into the doorway as I foolishly stumble about, talking about what llama-butterfly hybrid I would eat. Phil. I wrench my eyes open. They have crusted over and feel like they have been scrubbed with salt-infused barbed wire. The first thing I see is carpet. Why am I on the floor? I lift my head slightly and can see mixed match socks. The tops of them are covered with black skinny jeans. Phil. He's sitting on a chair unlike any we've had in either apartment. It's old-fashioned and worn. It would not look out of place at a Mad Hatter's tea party, but this was my own bedroom. Why is this chair here? A cold panic swept through me as I tried to wipe my eyes and found my wrists shackled to the odd chair's ornate front legs. "Ugh, Phil, I don't want to sleep. I'm too drunk," I slur, whining at the older boy. He giggles again. He's also clearly had a few. "This will help." He has a wet washcloth in his hand, and isn't that just like Phil, always taking care of his Dan? He held the washcloth to my face. He must have spilled something on his sleeve. A lot of something. The smell was overtaking me. I cried out weakly as my vision began to blur. Everything was black with the echo of Phil's laugh bouncing around my aching head. "Good morning, Dan," Phil smiled. "Sleep well?" He closed the laptop on his lap and looked down at me. There was an odd glint in his eyes, something I had never seen before. Something mad. "Yeah," I said distractedly. "Where did that chair come from?" "Oh, real nice, Dan," I thought to myself. "You've been knocked out and chained up by your roommate who is acting nuttier than usual. And what do you ask? You ask about interior decorating. Good one, Dan." Phil, however, took no notice of the odd situation. "I went up to the attic while you were at Tesco the other day," he grinned. "I don't know why I was scared to go up there. I mean, there's nothing to be scared of. And this chair was all that was up there." He chuckled again, stroking the red upholstery lovingly. "It just sort of called to me, you know, the way things sometimes do." I nodded, pretended to be interested as I tried to devise a why exactly I was chained to the object in question. "You know, the way I called you once upon a time." Phil grinned and moved the laptop to my desk without leaving the chair. "Wait, what?" That had caught my attention. "He called to me?" "Yes, of course I did, Daniel." His grin got bigger and slightly scarier. "And you heard me loud and clear. Although lately," he started playing with his fingernails, feigning disinterest, "you seem to have forgotten that it was I who called you, not the other way around." He reached down to my now frozen form and ran his fingers along my cheek. I could not rip my eyes from his. This wasn't the Phil I knew. Pain skittered across my face like a mild shock, and I gasped in surprise. When Phil pulled his hand away, it was painfully obvious that he had hidden a razor blade between his fingers. Blood had oozed out of my left cheek and onto Phil's hand. He grinned still larger and let out another strained giggle. I felt my jaw drop as he lifted the stained digits to his mouth and licked the blood away. "What the fuck are you doing?" I screeched, scandalized. "Making you remember." His kindly smile was all wrong. I slammed my hands to the floor, trying to wriggle away to no avail. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears stung my already sore face. I looked up indignantly, trying to pull my most threatening face, only to see that he wasn't looking back. Phil had taken off his right sock. The crazed look was back in his eyes as he started petting my hair with his unclothed foot, giggling all the while like a toddler with a new plaything. "Phil, stop." I was getting tired of this. I just wanted to get up. My body was stiff and achy and my temper short. Phil moved his foot down to my neck and I spasmed away from it, only to fall onto my face because of the handcuffs. "Phil, seriously." I tried to show dominance in my voice, but it cracked and I felt helpless. My tears flowed freely. "You are so pathetic, Dan. I'm sure anyone else would already be out of this situation, and here you are on the floor crying like a child." I frowned at myself. "You tasted good, Dan. Don't you want some?" Phil grinned. "No," I snapped. "Let me go, Phil." He didn't. Instead of doing anything sane, He rubbed his first few toes across my aching cut in my face and gathered blood, making it sting even harder. I tried to wriggle away, but somehow, despite my efforts, his foot was shoved into my mouth and the blood-tear mixture dissolved into it. It was at this moment when I slumped over and admitted defeat. "Good boy, Dan," Phil said sweetly as the washcloth was returned to my face and I passed out once more. When I woke up, I was still attached to the blasted chair, this time on my back, staring up at a video camera. I groaned and rolled my head away from the lens. "Don't worry, Dan, this isn't going on YouTube," Phil smiled down at me. He was wearing the same blue shirt and black jeans, although he had replaced his sock, thank God. I must not have been out for too long this time. My head throbbed worse than before, and I didn't bother replying. "RedTube, maybe," Phil giggled, putting his hand over his mouth. My eyes widened in horror. "You must be dehydrated," he hummed as he overturned a mug of warm coffee onto my face. I spluttered and choked out the sugary liquid. It ran through my eyes, up my nose and into my cut. The tears came back. Why was he doing this to me? "Oh, now you've gotten your shirt all wet. Probably stained the carpet too, naughty." He grinned down at me and kicked the side of my head as hard as someone could sitting down. I felt my face crumple in defeat. Hope, it seemed, was lost. "What do you want from me, Phil?" My voice was small and broken. I was ashamed of myself for using it. "You're my best friend. Why are you doing this?" I dwindled into a whisper and dared to look at his face, the mad, giggly mask of my flatmate. "Because you need to be punished. Because you don't love me. You were supposed to always love me. I mean..." An enraged laugh barked from his mouth and his voice gained volume. "You were my frickin' fangirl, Dan. You were a feline, and felines should always obey their leader. You didn't obey. You stopped loving me." I could hear a distant spark of hurt in his voice, but the insanity was too strong. "And now? You will pay. And then you will love me again." He got up out of the chair and straddled my midsection. Emotions roared inside of me, the biggest one being confusion. Betrayal, fear, and most strangely, lust intermixed. I blamed the last 3 years of unintentional celibacy. "Oh, nice, Dan," the self-deprecating voice inside my head snapped. "He's got you at his complete mercy, and you're explaining away homoerotic tendencies. Brilliant! You really are an idiot. You do belong here." Phil took the same razor from before and ran a line from the neck of my shirt down to the top of my jeans, slicing it neatly in two. Blood followed, as I expected, although the cut didn't seem too deep. Thank God for small favours. He took the remaining fabric and ripped it, severing my shirt completely and ruining it. "Goodbye, cat shirt. I knew you well." Phil giggled and bounced a bit excitedly as he ran another line down each of my sleeves, cutting once again into my flesh. He leaned close to me, one hand resting on his beloved chair, caressing the woodwork and his face just centimetres away. "I love it when you cry, Dan," he harshly whispered into my ear. "It makes me feel stronger." He ran his tongue over my eyes and cheeks. His breath made me break out into goosebumps. All I could smell was his Lynx deodorant and a slight undertone of his ridiculous feminine body wash. I was overwhelmed by the closeness that I barely noticed him playing in my blood until he wiped it on my bottom lip and covered it with his own. Phil was kissing me. Adrenaline pumped through my system as I tried to throw him off. This was wrong. Wrong, 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 so wrong. I panicked and thrashed about harder, but he was too strong. He forced my jaw open with his hands and quickly muffled my screams with his tongue. I whimpered and fought off his intruding organ with my own. Too late, I realised he thought I was kissing him back. Tears once again sprung from my eyes, and I admitted this defeat. "You liked that, didn't you, you little pervert?" Phil smirked down at me, his face flushed and lips slightly redder than before. I shook my head frantically, trying to stop the tears. "Oh, I think you did." Phil ground the heel of his hand into my crotch. I squeaked in pain and horror to find myself slightly hard. My face flushed and my heart sped up. This has to be a dream. Things like this do not happen to normal heterosexual males and their lovable pushover heterosexual friends. I'm having a nightmare. That's the only explanation. "So, Dan, I thought we could have some fun." Phil dragged the word fun out like a girl a decade younger than him and fussed with his hair. I stared at him incredulously. "Really? Oh, Phil, what could possibly be more fun than this?" I spat sarcastically and glared in the face of my captor. Phil laughed and threw his head back, sighing. "This?" He laughed again and reached behind my head. I strained to see what he was after and saw all too soon when he brought it back. "Phil, "What are you doing with an ant farm?" I whispered. He tittered. "Oh, nothing. I just remembered that you're covered in coffee." He smiled and winked flirtily. He opened the box and shook the ants out, much like he was putting sprinkles on a cake. My heart stopped and I felt hundreds of tiny bodies crawl on me, drawn to my face and torso by the smell of sugar. I couldn't scream. All I could do was close my eyes and mouth and pray to a deity that I didn't believe in to save me from this living hell. I could feel them crowding on my face and my neck like a moving blindfold, going across my eyelids and into my nostrils. Some were crowding around my cuts, devouring the dry blood. I had never wanted to die more than I did in that moment. Suddenly I heard a click, and then another, and felt Phil pull me up from the chair. The ants rained off me, and he swore. "Fuck, Dan, keep your little mates to yourself, you filthy slut." He giggled, proud of himself, and slammed me into a wall, more ants falling. Even though he was hurting me, he was freeing me from the six-legged demons. He was my angel of mercy. "Missed the door there, Dan," he laughed and shoved me into the hallway. I could feel the remaining ants climbing up my nose. I panicked and tried to wipe them away with my now free hands. "Don't think about it." Phil shoved me over and I fell to the floor with a thud. At least it was carpeted. I rubbed my face on the carpet, desperately trying to free myself from the ants. They were in my ears now. Phil lifted me up by my hair, wrenching me from my feet and slung me into a room. He then pushed me again. I felt my legs hit porcelain and I tumbled backwards into our bathtub, slamming my head against the tiled wall. I felt cold water hit my face, sprayed from the detachable shower head, and far too close. Water flooded my eyes and ears, soaked my head and made me choke, but it washed the ants away, and for that, I was thankful.